Hello, and welcome to the Gaia update for the Gemini new moon that happens on May 22nd, 23rd, 2020. I'm Adrienne Elise. Well, this Gemini new moon is powerful, a lot of Gemini energy with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and the moon all in Gemini, as well as the North Node having just transitioned into Gemini. So this new moon in Gemini, new moon's always representing a new beginning, but it's giving us a powerful glimpse into what this next year and a half might be about for us with the North Node in Gemini. So it's a window into what we're working on and what's going on. So the Sun and the moon, this new moon happens very early in Gemini at about 2 degrees. And so that puts it into a very sweet trine with Saturn, who's just turned retrograde, but still at 1 degree Aquarius. Saturn having moved over from that Capricorn drama into the sign of Aquarius, dipping his toes into the new energies, asking us, how do we rebuild? How do we build a new world? What is this? How do we find a foundational structure in these new energies? And so this new moon in Gemini with the sun and the moon in a sweet trine with Saturn is saying, hey, yes, we're building something new. We're going to get there. It's happening, but it's going to take a lot of rearranging. And that's the energy of this Venus retrograde. So Saturn turned retrograde, now Venus turned retrograde, Jupiter turned retrograde. And so we're kind of having this pulling back energy of like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Where are we going? Now, this is a very uncomfortable place in general when Venus is retrograde. But Venus in retrograde in Gemini is putting it for a whole month this month in square to Neptune in Pisces, bringing up feelings of confusion and everything is wrong. But we have to understand that this type of confusion, nothing working out, everything seems wrong, that's typically a place you have to go to before things right themselves in our lives, right? And so this Venus retrograde is about a rearranging of our conceptual reality in Gemini, of our thoughts and beliefs. And in order to get to that new paradigm, to get to those new possibilities, typically, you go through a period of time where everything feels wrong. And that's kind of where we're at. But Gemini has an energy of quick thinking, Mercury as the ruler at home in Gemini for this new moon, with coming up in a conjunction with Venus. So this is also when Venus is having its second of 3 exact squares with Neptune, bringing this energy of confusion, bringing this energy of, I don't know how I feel, I don't know what I want, nothing is quite right. And yet that's sometimes, this feeling of our world being turned upside down in this current situation that we're in. That's often how, everything has to be it's almost like, if you're going to clean out your closet, first you got to just kind of empty out the whole thing and it's total chaos, right? And then you get organized. And that's kind of this place of everything being turned upside down in our world in order to become more right and more appropriate to who we really are in this spiritual age. So, this is all on the table right now, and it's really important to understand that it's all about trying to get it more right and more correct. And in order to do that, you have to get things very jumbled up and confused and everything wrong. But the energy of Gemini has this kind of magic to it in that it's about quick thinking, adjusting our thinking, new thoughts, new beliefs, opening your mind, exploring options, right? And that energy can leave doors open to miracles and things that you didn't think were possible and new possibilities coming in. And this is this interesting energy of this Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, right there with Venus retrograde in square, they're in exact conjunction, exact square to Neptune, jimmying the lock on this situation. And it's like we've got these delusions. With Neptune, it's always like, what's real? What's not real? What's happening? And then Venus is like, what do I want? Where am I going? What matters to me? And what makes me feel good? And it's all on the table to be rearranged. And we've got this like deep, dark delusions coming up around the Piscean age and around our own traumatic past and relationships, typically, because that's Venus, and especially in retrograde. But then we also have some magic that's trying to come in, some new possibilities beyond what we could conceive. And you kind of have to let yourself be in the unknown or the confusion in order to allow that energy to come into your life. And that's the key to these times. And this new moon in Gemini is kind of like, can we crack the code? Because in order for magic to come in, you got to be willing to have your mind blown open and apart, and your concept of reality. Whenever we have a mystical revelation, which is also this Neptune and Pisces energy, it rearranges our world. If you're going to have a serious spiritual experience, a near-death experience, a very powerful and profound connection experience, it's going to turn your world upside down. That's a good thing, right? Because it's shaking out what's not true. It's shaking out of your life what doesn't fit you. And this is what's going on a massive global scale, as well as personally, individually in our lives. And it's a time to surrender to that greater truth of who we are, that greater mystical experience, which is actually way more true and real than the play of events in this lower 3D reality. And that's actually been such a part of the problem for these souls that follow this work, are drawn to this work. It's like, you can exist in these other realms, but then how do you make it work here in this reality and connect with people and find an expression of that greater spiritual self? And then it's been continually invalidated over lifetimes and through relationships. And now with these energy changing on the earth, it's about you coming into that greater truth and being like, yeah, no, this is so much more real. Like if you have ever had an experience, say, of like a ceremony experience of, and a mystical experience of like what we've been talking about, it's like, whoa, it makes this world feel so small and so insignificant, right? And we got to remember that there's a play out right now of the old nightmare. And this Gemini new moon is about cracking the code, opening up our psyche to allow in the dream, to reclaim the dream that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and we've been living out this lie and being, bought into this delusion that we are physical beings trying to get to something spiritual, trying to validate something in this world to just kind of grab a hold of. And that's why these advanced souls, have been struggling. So the whole reason why things have been so hard for you is because you're so right. I mean, so what's been wrong about you is actually what's so right about you. And this is what this whole time is. It's about, okay, everything is wrong because nothing in our world has been right about as far as who we really are as spiritual beings, as a fractal of God consciousness embodied, in a physical body. It's quite an amazing, beautiful, powerful realization. And when you have a realization like that, it puts everything in perspective, but it also is going to be like, whoa, the structures of my life maybe aren't really supporting that greater, wider spiritual truth. And this is kind of what everything that's going on the planet is really about in the bigger picture, is that Capricorn energy of Pluto and Jupiter and then Saturn, this whole play of this 2020 astrology, is that these structures don't fit who we really are. These structures cannot support us energetically in the new age. And we got to have an overhaul. And it's not pretty, but it's that place we're at where we're cleaning out the closet and we got to look at what's been hiding in the corners so we can make it right. And so just incredibly profound, Venus makes three exact squares during this retrograde with Neptune, and this time with Mercury, the ruler of Gemini. So Mercury wants to understand. Mercury is trying to play a role of a bridge between the greater, wider truth and our everyday reality. Mercury is also a trickster, right? And it's like, okay, is it like, can we tap into the mastermind energy of Gemini and Mercury and like get ourselves out of the trap of the lower matrix? Or are we like manipulated and tricked into falling back asleep in the nightmare instead of claiming the dream? And that's everything that's going on. So it should be interesting. Like, it could be a time for these souls to get some serious clarity about who you are in the bigger picture, and like kind of that claiming of that dream, that soul memory back to the last shift of ages that you were a part of, and that spiritual revelation, and bringing that home into your heart and living that truth and being like, yeah, we played out some really dark old stories, but they're not anywhere as near as true and powerful as the spiritual reality of what we are. And that's what you're here for. That's why your life hasn't worked out. And that's why it's time to work it out into this greater truth and be that living, breathing example. And this new moon is speaking to that. It's like, this is a new chapter. The North Node is in Gemini. Yes, it's Venus retrograde, but it's all about moving into a new chapter, new perspective. And new perspectives bring chaos, because everything in your life that was based on the old perspective doesn't fit. So, here we are in that place. Now, during this time, this Venus retrograde, Mars has moved over into Pisces, bringing some more of that Pisces energy, because Mars is like our warrior, right? And wherever Mars is, it's this male wanting to take action. And so it's like Mars and Pisces can spin out and stir up mud and get even more confused. But it also is kind of a drive of this, with what Mars has gone through and the divine masculine energy that's trying to land on the planet, there's a powerful energy of like a resolution and a dedication, devotion to that higher spiritual principle, to your spiritual service, and kind of pushing you into a more dedicated and devoted daily life experience of the spiritual. And that's something that we used also. It's the stirring up of the mud and the confusion. And every time I try to go forward, I'm going in circles, and that's kind of like a picture of like when you're rowing a boat and you only got one, the steering, and it's like you're in the eddy and you're like going in circles. The more you try to go forward, the more you're going in circles. But maybe it's because the way you are trying to go forward isn't the right path. Like, can we get in the flow? Can we tap back into the spiritual support that is seeping in through that lower matrix vibration? Can we tap back into that flow? And that's what this rearranging, going backwards, going in circles is all about. And now it's interesting because Mars will be at 6 degrees Pisces for this new moon. And what that means is that just after this new moon, the moon will go into a square with Mars. The moon in Gemini in square with Mars in Pisces. And so we've got more Gemini square Pisces energy of like trying to rearrange our psyche in order to sort out what's a dream and what's the delusion and what's the nightmare and where's the possibilities and what's the distortion, and so this is a very potent time because the moon does that right away after this new moon because it moves so fast, and then the sun will do that. So starting at this new moon, we're moving into a couple of week period, actually a little longer, that will feel all the way to mid-June, because the sun it comes in and out of a square with Mars. It comes exact in a square on the 4th of June and then again the 7th through the 9th of June. And so it's like the sun is, who are we? Who are we in this, and trying to figure out what's going on. The sun in Gemini, it's like, Gemini is the twins So we've got, just take 4 planets, 3 planets, the moon and the north node, and then multiply that by 2. And we've got a lot of personalities at play here, right? But the whole energy of the multiple personality of Gemini is about trying to get back to a place of center, using the duality, using the power of the archetypes of me and other, and male and female, to get back to a place of center. And so, but of course, it's like you got to go into that ultimate confusion, right? Like anytime you go out to that spiritual revelation, you have to go through the lower astral plane, where it's like energies trying to distract you and lower demonic energies, right? And then you can get to that spiritual revelation. And that's just like everything, like is playing out right now in the world. So the sun will we'll start feeling that sun square Mars just a few days after, in the next week after this new moon. And so that's kind of the next chapter we're looking at, of the sun in Gemini squaring up with Mars in Pisces, and like, who were we in the Piscean age? Who were we at the soul memory of the beginning of the Piscean age, of the spiritual revelation? And how do we adjust our thinking? How do we adjust our identity? Which has definitely got this ego death kind of energy. Like, I don't know who I am. And then Venus retrograde is like, I don't know what I want. And total confusion, except for, like we talked about, the concept here is that if you're going to shift to things that are better in your life, and you can think through your life of these times, right? Like when you ended up having a big shift into something that was better, right? And a better job, better relationship, you had to go through a period of time of losing everything you had and not knowing what you wanted and everything being wrong. It's like we don't make changes as humans unless we get uncomfortable, right? And that's this Venus retrograde. It's like, ugh, I can't ignore anymore, especially since this world situation, that these structures of my life and the way I've been living and doing it isn't really supporting my greater path and purpose, and that's this big shift we were in leading up to this new moon. It's like just the very beginning of Gemini. So we're kind of that end degrees of the sun in Taurus, trining up with Jupiter at the end of Capricorn, right? And Jupiter in Capricorn is trying to bring possibilities of changing the structures of our world to fit us better, and what needs to break down, with that Pisces, Pluto also there in Capricorn. And so the sun in trine to Jupiter leading up to this new moon is saying, do you deserve it? Are you good enough? Are you worthy of this expansion into the new? And bringing up a lot of where we've kind of bought into, a lot of what's gotten us to this place of our human evolution is where we've given our power away to those authority contracts, which is the Capricorn energy. And Jupiter says, okay, is it time to break out of these chains? And then the sun in Taurus and trine says, that's all, it's all tied into whether I feel worthy or deserve, except for it's silly, that concept, because you can't deserve or not deserve who you really are. It's just who you are. And that takes us right back to that soul memory it's bubbling up in these souls of like spiritual revelation and the bigger, wider purpose and the bigger, wider truth of why we're here, and reclaiming the dream out of the chaos of the nightmare. And it's got to get more chaotic before we can get to the truth, and it's got to get more wrong before we can make it right. And that's exactly where we are at in the collective and the individual. So I hope you'll consider joining me for a live activation for this new moon in Gemini. It's going to be leading up to the exact time of this Gemini new moon, and that's going to be at 11 a.m. Mountain Time on Friday, May 22nd. So I hope you'll consider joining me. It's $10, and this is an opportunity to get into these energies, set our vibration, hold a vibration together, get the information we need, the support we need, the images we need to make this shift, and these soul groups coming together to claim that dream and claim that bigger, wider spiritual truth, and see the crack in the code and use this Gemini rearranging Gemini magic to let those miracles energy come in as we use our collective consciousness together. So I hope I'll see you there. If you can't make the live in your time zone, you can definitely just catch the replay. The energy is encoded. We're working outside of time here. So the energy of that Gemini new moon will be encoded into the recording, and you can receive the messages and get that activation, get that guided meditation to set the course towards the right, whatever that is, just kind of see through the veil out of the everything wrong into, it's about making it more right. And so I hope to see you there. And thanks so much for being with me on the journey. I look forward to seeing you soon. I'm Adrienne Elise. Namaste.